Eli Lilly just dropped early data on a drug almost nobody outside Wall Street is talking about, and it could crack open $1 billion monopoly that one company has held for over a decade. The drug came from a startup called Ajax Therapeutics, which Lilly quietly swallowed, and now it's showing real signs of working in patients who have basically run out of options. The disease is called myelofibrosis. It's a rare blood cancer where your bone marrow turns to scar tissue. Your spleen swells, you feel exhausted in a way that doesn't lift. And for years, the standard answer has been one drug, made by one company, at one eye-watering price. That drug is Jakafi. The company is Incyte. And Jakafi is what's called a JAK inhibitor, a pill that blocks a specific signaling pathway your cancer cells are hijacking. Here's what you need to understand. Jakafi pulls in something like $2.5 billion a year for Incyte. It is more or less the entire foundation of their business, and it works for a while until it doesn't. Because that's the catch nobody loves talking about. A lot of myelofibrosis patients eventually stop responding to Jakafi. The drug runs out of road, and once that happens, the options get grim fast. So, when Lilly's new candidate showed encouraging results, specifically in those hard-to-treat patients, the analyst community lit up. Because that is the exact crack in Jakafi's armor. That is the part of the market Incyte has never really solved. And this is where it gets interesting, because Lilly didn't develop this drug in-house. They bought it, they acquired Ajax Therapeutics, a small biotech most people had never heard of, and folded the program into their pipeline. Then they took it to the European Hematology Association meeting and showed the world what Ajax had been cooking. Now, I want to be careful here, because this is early data, not a phase 3 readout, not an approval, not a head-to-head trial against Jakafi where one drug clearly wins. What Lilly showed is the kind of signal that makes analysts write excited notes and makes Incyte's stock wobble. It is not yet a finished story, but the framing matters, because in the world of cancer drugs, a new JAK inhibitor that works in patients who failed the old JAK inhibitor is the holy grail of this particular niche. That's the thing the field has been chasing, and if this is the kind of inside the pipeline story you want more of, the kind your doctor probably hasn't read yet, subscribe. This channel lives in that gap. So let's talk about why this matters beyond the stock tickers. Myelofibrosis is rare, but it's brutal. We're talking about people whose blood-making machinery is literally being replaced by scar tissue. The spleen grows so large it presses on other organs. The fatigue is the kind that ends careers and shrinks lives. Jakafi, when it works, shrinks the spleen and eases the symptoms. It does not cure the disease, it buys time. And for over a decade, it has been almost the only game in town, which means Incyte has had enormous pricing power and enormous leverage. There have been other entrants, a drug called Inrebic from Bristol Myers Squibb, another called Vonjo, a newer one called Ojara. Each carved out a small piece, mostly in patients with specific complications like low platelets or anemia. None of them dethroned Jakafi. So why is Lilly's entry getting analysts excited? Because Lilly is not a scrappy small biotech with one shot. Lilly is the company behind Mounjaro and Zepbound, the obesity juggernauts. Lilly has marketing muscle, sales infrastructure, and the patience to play a long game. When Lilly decides a category is worth competing in, the incumbent should be nervous. And here's the part that doesn't get said out loud often enough. The reason these JAK drugs are so lucrative is not just that the disease is serious. It's that the patient population is locked in. Once you're on Jakafi, switching is hard, stopping is dangerous, and the alternatives have historically been worse. That is the definition of pricing power in pharma. A credible second-line option changes that math. It gives doctors leverage, it gives patients leverage, and eventually, if the data holds up through bigger trials, it gives insurers leverage too. But let's pump the brakes on the hype. What we have right now is early-stage clinical data presented at a medical conference. That is the very beginning of the regulatory journey, not the end. The history of oncology is littered with drugs that looked spectacular in phase 1 and fell apart in phase 3. JAK inhibitors specifically come with baggage. The whole class has been scrutinized for safety signals around infections, blood clots, and cardiovascular events. The FDA slapped boxed warnings on JAK inhibitors used for autoimmune conditions a few years ago. Any new entrant has to prove not just that it works, but that it doesn't quietly hurt people in ways the old drugs don't. Lilly's early readout doesn't answer those questions yet. It can't. The trials aren't big enough or long enough. What it does is open a door. It says, here's a molecule that seems to do something useful in patients the existing drug has failed. That's the headline. The fine print comes later, in trials that will take years. And here's where I want to zoom out, because there's a bigger pattern playing out. Big Pharma has spent the last few years on an acquisition spree. buying up small biotechs that did the risky early science. Lilly buying Ajax is part of that pattern. So is Pfizer buying Seagen. So is Merck buying Prometheus. The model is simple. Let the startups burn through venture capital doing the dangerous experiments. When something works, write a check, fold the program into a global pipeline, and use your sales force to print money. It is efficient. It is also part of why drug prices stay where they are. Because when Lilly eventually prices this drug, assuming it gets approved, you can bet it will not be cheap. Jakafi costs patients and insurance plans something on the order of $17,000 a month at list price. The new entrant will be priced in that neighborhood, maybe higher if the data is strong enough to justify it. That's the part that doesn't make the biopharma dive headline. The competition is real, but it's competition between two extremely expensive options, not competition that brings prices down to earth. In rare disease oncology, the pricing ceiling barely exists. So what should you actually take away from this? A few things. One, a major pharma company just showed early signs of cracking a monopoly that has stood for over a decade. Two, the data is promising but preliminary. And JAK inhibitors as a class carry real safety questions that need answering. Three, even if this drug succeeds, it will not make this disease cheaper to treat. It will make it more treatable, which is genuinely good news, but the economics will remain brutal. And four, this is how modern drug development actually works. A startup you've never heard of does the science. A giant buys them, the giant takes the credit, sets the price, and competes with another giant for a patient population that has almost no leverage. That's the system. None of this is medical advice. If you or someone you love has myelofibrosis, the people to talk to are your hematologist and your care team. They know your specific situation. They know what trials might be open to you. They know what makes sense for your case in a way no YouTube script ever could. What I can tell you is that the landscape is shifting. For the first time in a long time, there's a credible threat to Jakafi's throne. Whether that threat translates into better outcomes for patients or just better quarterly earnings for Lilly is the question the next few years of trial data will answer. And that's the tension at the heart of every story like this. Real scientific progress and aggressive corporate strategy are happening in the same room. At the same time, driven by the same data, you can root for the science and still keep one eye on the price tag. Because in this corner of medicine, a breakthrough and a billing code arrive together, and the patient is the one who pays for both. If this kind of breakdown is what you've been looking for, hit like and subscribe, and I'll keep pulling back the curtain.